as we are getting ready for our next panel, we are 102 as such. I see already Neil, Ken, and Paul, let's say in the waiting areas. Feel free to unmute yourself and on video yourself as such, and we will be starting our next panel as such. Nice to see you there, Paul. Nice to see you there, Neil. And I saw Ken was already there, and he will. Yeah, there it is. Nice to see you, Ken. How are you all doing, gentlemen?
Doing awesome.
Great. Doing great. Thank you.
It's almost Friday.
Come again?
It's almost Friday.
It is almost Friday. You know what? It's for me means coming in the morning. We had Eric Christie talking about, as he said, his work is his hobby. So I think with that particular experiment analogy, I think today is Friday. I'm enjoying it. Our participants are enjoying it, and thank you once again for being here on the panel. So just to put the context together, we will go around and try to introduce ourselves a little bit of the institutions you represent. But before that, we will just go around the table in just talking a little bit about yourself. I would say people already have read about you and your bio and your illustrious career, but let's try to show them a small glimpse of your own personality. So we can go, let's say for me, it's going to be left to right. So Paul, you are first. Paul, what do you do for fun? Tell us something that you enjoy over weekends or over long weekends, and what's your inspiration from that fun activities?
Well, I can tell you from a perspective of fun, I'm a proud father of 3. So while it is fun, it is also the ultimate challenge right now with virtual learning and having 2 8-year-olds and a 5-year-old re-entering school. So it's a good combination. So I straddle the line of fun and pulling my small hairs out. But outside of that, I would say I spent a fair amount of time working on a project. Many people don't know, but my dad is a producer and arranger from Motown. And so he is in his mid-70s now. He has a 50-plus year career in music as a producer and arranger from some of the greats in the early days of Motown. And what I'm doing now is a hobby kind of project, is attempting to, quote unquote, give him his flowers while he's still here. And that means I'm putting together a documentary with other people who have worked with him across the industry and doing it in an animated kind of fun way. So I'll have to share this highlight reel with you, so that you can critique it and give me some quality feedback and tell me how to make it better.
I would love to do that, and that's an honor for understanding, listening to that. I think we talked about that last time too. Means the Motown and the kind of a signature it has globally. Means I came here 19 years ago from India. There was no reason for me to know anything, but few things you know about the USA. You know the Big Apple. You know Detroit. You know Motown. I'm not, I was a music buff or something. I'm still learning about music, but you just knew that. And I started my career at GM Design Studio. I had an amazing great friend over there called Vernon Folkes, and he helped me get culturized. And I said, okay, tell me which books to read and which movies to see. And the first deck of DVDs he gave to me was Temptations. And it just brought everything together, like to say, like, wow, the passion, the gritness, the perseverance that we have over here as the people. And since then, I have never left Detroit. Detroit is my city right now, 19 years, and maybe more 19 years, I will be here. So I would love to have a look at that and just see how to celebrate that time. The offering flowers is a pretty great way, but it's celebration of what was happening during that time. So that's a great project to do for fun. By the way, you really missed in the morning, Lanea, none other than Lanea, started the entire conference by her cello performance. So I know you're inclined, but eventually I think you can see the recording of it too.
Yes, I will.
So thank you once again. That was amazing. Over to the next person, Neil. Before that, I should maybe drink with this glass with you. How are you doing, Neil? And what do you do for fun? This is go green time.
What do I do for fun? I'm a workaholic, so I just always seem to have my hands in a lot of different things. I wear a lot of hats and juggle and spin a lot of plates and juggle and ride a unicycle all at the same time. So I don't know what downtime or relaxation is. The only thing that even approximates that for me is I try to make time to work out just about every day. Like the guy who was the chef in the last presentation, I too just lost a lot of weight, but that was really due to a extreme commitment to just eating better and eating less, and then also having a lot of fitness equipment at home. My wife is a fitness instructor, so for somebody who's stuck at home during the pandemic, my situation is about as good as it gets because in effect, we have a fitness studio in our basement. So I have no shortage of fitness equipment to take advantage of. So between trying to squeeze an hour in a day to work out and then all of the other professional activities that I'm involved in, that pretty much consumes my life these days.
Neil, that's what you call no excuses.
Pretty much. Pretty much.
You have all the equipment, you have the best trainer, and for her, you are the best guinea pig to try all her new activities.
No, I'm terrible. She will not work with me, won't work on me. She says I'm the worst client she has. So because I talk back and I think I know better, and she hates working with me.
I know what it would be. Means when I had the I would say not the luck, but the unluck part to option to teach driving to my wife. I said, I'm not going to do that. I had my very good best friend actually help her drive rather than me, because it's exactly where it is. Like I can talk back, she can talk back, and no and that. So just like, no, I will not be over here. But I think, Neil, I know exactly what you do for fun. Thanks for sending me the copy of your book, and maybe as we are talking about, you can try to refer to this. So Neil just spent most of his COVID quarantine time, and when people ask like, what did you do right now in five months? This is one of the I would say projects that you did, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
I did not get a complete time to read through all of it, but I glanced through it, and I want to learn more directly from you. So that's a great thing to do for fun within all the other things that you are doing too. Awesome. Ken, your turn. What do you do for fun, man?
Well, a little bit like Neil, I really enjoy what I do, so I tend to just love my work. But my wife gave me a hard time about that. She was like, "You work too much. You need a hobby." And so I was like, "Well, what kind of hobby can I come up with?" And so I actually took up woodworking. So I've been doing a lot of woodworking, making furniture, just something I do for fun. It's a fun little passion. Plus, on the weekends, I love to do a lot of biking. I do road biking, mountain biking, and I love to kayak when I have time. And a fun little fact, I can actually kayak from my neighborhood. The Grand River runs through my neighborhood right here to the office, a couple blocks over. So I can kayak from home to work if I want to.
Wow,
that's cool.
That's really cool to have. Actually, you can drop a kayak in the water right in the backyard as such. In our first panel in the morning, even Mark loves canoeing and kayaking. Talking about woodworking, in the first panel we had Eric Christie also. He actually is a hands-on woodworker and a startup kind of and candidate, I would say. So eventually, love to put both of you in touch. So as we are going through, it's nice to understand a little bit snippets about each other too. The context today right now is trying to understand, means we have this amazing kind of an boom happening in the world of startups and entrepreneurs, not just in Berlin, not just in San Francisco, right here in our Midwest, Detroit, Michigan area too. Lansing, Chicago, Cleveland, Columbus, Toronto, our area is right now doing really exceptionally well. And there might be plenty of indicators and triggers to have that, but somehow we are seeing that kind of an amazing birth of it. And your respective institutions are helping in that kind of an, I would say, timeline for startups, for seed, pre-seed, inventor, all kind of an stages too. So I think right now for the audience itself, some of them are startups, some of them are going to be wannabe startups. So I think the entire element to gather in this 1.5 hours is to see how you as individuals or you as individual institutes are helping them or have the tools to help them, and apart from that trying to let them know what to expect, what to do and what not to do. So that is the main context over here, and we will just try to go in and out. Doesn't have to be just me asking questions. Feel free to ask questions to each other, because you all are here for one common goal through different kind of an elements too. So having said that, should we just go around the table and now introduce your institution, your company, your incubator, and trying to let us know what might be a specific angle that you also aspire for your institution to be. So we can start each way, anyway. I will go on my screen from left to right. Paul, you want to start?
Sure, sure. So yeah, I'm Paul Reiser. I'm with Techtown Detroit. I've been at Techtown Detroit for now 6 years. And Techtown is Detroit's longest standing incubator and accelerator. And with respect to kind of, what we do as an institution, it's kind of a trifecta, three-legged stool approach, I guess you would say, where we definitely, inherent in our name, focus on tech entrepreneurs and support tech entrepreneurs. But we also provide physical space. We have well over 100,000 square feet in physical space spread out amongst 3 different properties in the Midtown Detroit area, where we provide co-working, longer term lease space, wet lab space, event space, meeting room space, you name it. And even physical kind of, like a living lab kind of space where across it, many people have heard of Next Energy, which has been a staple in the city of Detroit for many years. We now administer and manage that campus as well, on with Wayne State. So we provide an opportunity for pilots and demonstrations and for mistakes to be made and testing to be done as well there, with a microgrid and labs and a smart IoT home and various other resources that are accessible to the public. And I think one of the key elements is that access and accessibility to the public we try to provide. Yes, we provide, traditional entrepreneurial resources that are milestone driven and helping them establish value proposition and understanding competitive differentiation. But I think we also provide them a safety net. We provide them the willingness and the ability and the understanding of failure, that there's going to be pitfalls, there's going to be challenges, and we try to be that organization is going to catch them when they do fail or when they do have those bumps in the road. But we're also I think a connective tissue to the broader ecosystem. So I'm always very adamant that no entrepreneur is going to get everything they need from any single organization or person, ever. And as a matter of fact, as an entrepreneur, you should be pursuing perspectives and resources and comparing things and opportunities and resources from a variety of service providers and or resources across an ecosystem. So what we want to do is connect entrepreneurs at the right time to the right resource. So wherever that is, if that exists within Techtown or within our knowledge and our domain, that's fine. But we also want to connect them to other partner organizations who have areas of specialty and areas of domain expertise or resources that can also help these entrepreneurs grow.
That's beautiful. The safety net is a pretty important aspect of the confidence building process that a person, an inventor, a startup may or may not be having. The other element that you mentioned about the connective tissue is pretty amazing. It reminds me of that the ancient African proverb: if you want to run fast, run alone. If you want to run far, run together. And I think that's what we're trying to see. That we are here. We are your anchor point, and we can help you connect, as you said, the connective tissue as such. That's beautiful. Thank you. Ken, you want to go next?
Sure. So I'm Ken, one of the co-founders of Lean Rocket Lab, founded Lean Rocket Lab. We actually opened January 2019, so we're not quite 2 years old. Founded it with Brandon Markin. Lean Rocket Lab is at its core a manutech service provider. So we work with entrepreneurs specifically that are building physical products and or manufacturing innovations. And a little bit like Techtown, but on a much smaller scale. We run a co-working space where people can become a member, use a hot desk. We have dedicated desks and offices that people can rent more long-term. And then in the front of our building, we have a open to the public cafe, so sort of a healthy grab-and-go food, coffee shop, etc. And so we're building the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in the Jackson area, and we are part of the Michigan Smart Zone Incubator Network. And so all across the state, there's dotted about 19-20 smart zones, and most of them have some sort of startup incubator or accelerator associated with that. And Techtown is definitely that in Detroit. What is really unique and cool about Michigan's startup ecosystem is the state of Michigan, through the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, has introduced a pretty large amount of resources available for early stage startups. And what's really cool about Michigan in comparison with other states is our state has taken that approach of, you know, when you're starting a business, that early stage stuff is really hard, right? When you're raising money as an entrepreneur, most investors want to see some sort of traction and progress. But how do you get to that traction progress without having investment unless you have your own means to do so? And so what's really kind of great about the programs that are available through the Smart Zone network is the state said, hey, let's help some of these early stage startups get going. And so there's a pretty large amount of resources that are available for funding, for professional services, things that you need as a startup to get going. And so any one of the state Smart Zone incubators can assist entrepreneurs with that. And we definitely participate in that zone. But specifically our specialty is physical products and manufacturing innovations. And we actually run sort of two core programs. We run a manutech incubator. This is for earlier stage, sort of anything from ideation through commercialization. So if you have an idea or you're working on something, but you haven't quite sold it yet, our incubator is a perfect fit for that. And then for our later stage companies, we have an Industry 4.0 accelerator, and it's we do that in partnership with Automation Alley, as well as Lawrence Tech University Centropolis. Really neat program. It's actually a global program where it's North America's Industry 4.0 accelerator, and we attract startups from all over the world into our ecosystem here in Michigan. And startups that get accepted into that program receive a $110,000 investment, and then support through our 6-month program. So a lot around that. A lot of people ask us, you know, why manutech, why manufacturing, why physical products? One really kind of unique fact about our area. So again, we're over in Jackson, which I'm not sure if a lot of people probably drive through here on their way to somewhere, but we're at Interstate 94. We actually have a really robust and very unique manufacturing ecosystem here in the area. We have about 300 manufacturers. And what's unique about it is most of them are tier 2 and below in the supply chain, meaning they're smaller companies. And so what's really fantastic about that for entrepreneurial services is we can call any one of these manufacturing companies and say, hey, we're working on this specific, you know, product that needs this manufacturing methodology, and we can get them connected very quickly and get things made. And so we don't run a prototyping lab. We have 300 manufacturers that participate in our prototyping lab, if that makes sense. And so that's, so we're simply connecting innovative startups with innovative manufacturing companies in our area. Furthermore, all of our programs can run here in person at the lab, but also we do it virtually. We launched all of our virtual programs back in December. And I'm sure Paul could corroborate with this. We have seen a huge influx of innovation. One kind of note, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but during times of economic uncertainty and disruption are times that innovators rise up. And so we've seen some really great innovation happening from all over the world, but really a lot of stuff happening right here in Michigan. I'm just proud to be a part of it. It's really fun thing to do.
Absolutely, and that actually is very true. As a design studio also, we are an independent design studio, been here for last 87 years. The amount of proposals or calls or I would say requests from wannabe startups and entrepreneurs is really expanding, and there are plenty of reasons for that, and we can go over there. But before that, Neil, you want to explain elements from your side?
Sure. Well, as I mentioned before, I wear a number of different hats, but in my day job, I'm a member of the Burgess Institute for Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Michigan State University. So that's the single point across all campus and all the different colleges and programs at MSU and East Lansing around entrepreneurship. I joined MSU a little bit over 5 years ago, where I was recruited to come develop the undergraduate entrepreneurship program. I launched an undergraduate minor in entrepreneurship and innovation and grew that program to a number 16 ranking according to the Princeton Review about a year ago. Now my role is principally just teaching, and I teach in both the undergraduate entrepreneurship and executive MBA programs. So that's my day job. And the good news, bad news is, you know, we also have an accelerator and we have an incubator on campus and tons of resources. However, they're almost exclusively available to just students. Although there also is kind of across the hall, if you will, on Grand River in East Lansing from where our student incubator is located, there's something called the Technology Innovation Center, which is kind of like a co-working space with flexible lease term and stuff like that for companies that have graduated from our incubator and other small businesses in the community. It just also happens to be managed by the university. But the other hat that I wear is I'm really a serial entrepreneur, which is why I came to MSU in the first place. I spent most of my career in Chicago, where I grew up. So I moved to Michigan about 4 years ago, again, for the job at MSU. But on the side, I also do a lot of consulting and a whole bunch of other different things, all related to startups and innovation in one form or another. As GVAC noted, I co-authored my first book. I've got side businesses, and I've launched companies in every industry, ranging from food to toys to software to nanotechnology and everything in between. I also used to be a columnist for Forbes on topics related to innovation and startups and stuff like that. So personally, I try to make myself available to anyone, subject only to my bandwidth, to be of assistance. It's just kind of it's part of that entrepreneur's creed of, paying it forward and recognizing that, good entrepreneurs stop at nothing, asking, begging, borrowing for favors and scratching and clawing for whatever you can get. And so when I see people coming up behind me, to the best of my ability, I try to repay that if I can. So I'm a resource to the community, although I also represent Michigan State, which, again, there's a lot in East Lansing, but unfortunately, the majority of it is for students. However, if there's anybody listening, I'm happy to make connections to the university. We hire a bunch of student interns. There's a venture capital fund called Red Cedar Ventures that the university manages. And of course, there's a bunch of small businesses in the East Lansing area, many of which I've come to know personally.
That's beautiful, and there is plenty of different kind of a spectrum here. We have, let's say, I would say a range of here. I would say helping hands from proper institutions or individual. I would say consultants too. My question now, just to the panel, and we can go any way we want. But are there in the entire timeline of let's say an wannabe startup or an entrepreneur person, somebody has an idea all the way till they go and reach successful commercialization for TechTown or for Lean Rocket, are there any specific criteria or eligibility or maturity expectations that you get them into your program? So what might be their point of entry in, let's say, your spectrum? And then at the other end, what is their point of departure? What is the way that you let them go alone, I would say, in the commercial world? So what is in the entire timeline? Where do you start, and maybe where do you end? Who wants to go first? Paul, you want to go first? I said it can.
Sure. Yeah. From a point of where we start is interesting, because I think that we really try to pride ourselves on starting before the entrepreneur even reaches our doorstep. Meaning we're trying to do a very concerted and intentional amount of outreach, engagement, leveraging our physical space to have events that are not just TechTown events, but events that are by MSU, or events that are by Wayne State, or events that are by Lean Rocket, or events that are by Automation Alley, or partner events, corporations, law firms, so that we can engage in a very kind of non-intimidating kind of manner, showing people where the front door is, giving them that wow effect sometimes of, wow, I didn't know that there was a breadth of resources across our state that I could have access to. And most often, like Ken mentioned, these are no-cost services and resources that are provided by, the support of MEDC and a myriad of other partners across the state. So, but once they do, come in as a quote unquote client or hit our doorstep, at that point, we are typically very early stage, nascent, ideation, some people define it as, all the way through. Typically, we will work with companies maybe up to a Series A. And so at a point of, entry and the fundamentals of business model validation and customer discovery and competitive differentiation, all of those fundamental nuts and bolts. We're also wrapping around, those connections, those resources, those introductions, those experiences and testimonies from other entrepreneurs who have been where they are. Physical space, obviously at a lower price point that makes it affordable, because we don't want younger entrepreneurs to feel the burden of going and being locked into a 12 or 24-month lease while they're attempting to build a business, right? So that's where a lot of the physical spaces that a lot of the folks on this call, Neil, myself, Ken offer, as well as many other service organizations across the state offer. Then relative kind of, along that journey, along that pathway, we're bringing different resources, different coaches, different knowledge and expertise, programs, pitch competitions, you name it, everything that we can muster. And again, I need to reemphasize that it's very important to know that that doesn't always come from us. And it's very important for us to be that guide and that compass to help synthesize the ecosystem, make sense of it, and to reduce the barrier of intimidation of, man, it is. And I think Neil and Ken will probably attest to this, that it's tough for us to keep our arms around all of the new programs and all of the resources that are available, let alone someone who's walking into a door, who's building their first or second or third business, is entering the Michigan entrepreneurial ecosystem and is saying you have dozens of pathways and dozens of resources and dozens of programs. Where do I go? What do I do next? What do I do first? Those kinds of things. So we hope to, like I said, try to synthesize the ecosystem and help them navigate that. On the latter end, I think it varies. It definitely varies as far as how long we engage with an entrepreneur or a startup is based on their maturity, their growth rate, the industry that they're in. It's much different for sometimes a software or SaaS a startup is building a mobile app than a medical device, and their commercialization pathway are light years apart, or manufacturing physical product, again, process is a little bit more intensive, usually a little bit more resource intensive, a little bit more hand holding that's required. So it varies, but like I said earlier, typically at a Series A from a tech perspective is when, the investor is really taking a more hands-on approach. And we may have some intermittent engagement. We may still connect you with a lawyer. We may still connect you with a funding source. But it starts as a sliding scale, I think, to where the entrepreneurs themselves are more mature and able to handle their own pathway a bit, but then also the people that are in their closer network and investors and coaches and guides to help them move to that next stage are also more involved in there from a time perspective.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Paul. Ken?
I was going to say, Paul said it really well. I like to speak in analogies sometimes. So the analogy that I like to use is, as an entrepreneur launching a company, it's kind of like climbing Mount Everest, right? You can go to Singapore or wherever the Everest is at and start climbing the mountain on your own and try to figure it out. Or you can get,
sorry for interrupting.
or you can get a Sherpa, right? And a Sherpa is going to show you the path, guide you along. How do you climb? But not only is it important to understand the path, it's important to understand the pitfalls along the way, right? And so a lot of the resources we have are certainly, here's the path, but also here's some pitfalls and here's some resources to help you overcome that. And to echo what Paul said, the ecosystem is really built around everything from ideation. There's a whole library of resources from ideation all the way through commercialization and beyond. Series A is usually that point where, people graduate and move beyond the resources that are available through our ecosystem. But yeah, so that was just a little analogy to add what Paul said there.
Yeah, that's pretty good about finding the right kind of guides or Sherpas along the way for that specific task or that specific milestone to achieve. And it can be a different Sherpa in this patch. It can be a different guide over there, a different advisor over there. So it depends on, again, as you said, there are so multiple, I would say, domains. It might be tech, it might be physical, it might be something else, and how you connect between them. Neil, what's your take on this?
Well, I won't repeat what was said before. I agree with all of that, but I would just add two things to that. Number one, I would kind of invert your question. I mean, here in Michigan, the economy is evolved enough and there's enough critical mass so that there's resources available for every business at every stage. And so, you know, rather than try to catalog or identify all of the different resources, instead what I would suggest to entrepreneurs or people in need of those resources is to try to get clarity around what stage they're at and what kind of support they need. It's pretty clear, and I think this is what Paul and Ken were saying, is that as businesses mature, and certainly by the time they've raised the Series A, there's an implication that they've got a management team and investors and advisors and other people who can help them. So their need to rely on, you know, public sector resources like TechTown, for example, probably diminishes a lot as the company matures, right? So these things tend to skew, you know, very much towards early stage companies. The other thing I would say, which is just an observation, and I'm sure everybody's head will quickly nod, and you see this all the time among students, is everybody rushes to think that the first thing that they need to do is raise money. And so I can't even begin to express how much time I spend with people who either mistakenly think that that's the stage that they're at, or really don't understand what it is that investors are looking for in order to be able to raise money. So I wish we could just sort of put that aside, because all of the other services of whether it's legal assistance or the need for space or mentors or access to prototyping equipment, I mean, all of that's pretty straightforward, but then just everybody gets mucked up in, I need money, and then that just kind of clouds their judgment and creates a lot of confusion in my experience.
Yeah, and that's beautiful. So let's try to expand on that point. If let's say raising money should not be the first one, what would be the first kind of an attributes they should be looking at?
Well, that's a layup question for me, because my book, which is in your hand, is all about finding product market fit, right? And so the thing that we teach and preach about any kind of startup business, and this applies with established companies as well, and I'm sure maybe you use different words, but probably in the design work that you do at Sundberg-Ferar, I'm sure this is also part of it, but really understanding your customers' needs and designing a product or service that has what we call the value proposition that meets those needs is really the first step. Now, there's a million other things that you also need to take care of, but if you don't understand the market that you're trying to serve, and if you don't, like a lock and a key, wind up coming to market with a product or a service that meets the needs of your target market, you can do everything else right and you'll fail.
Yeah.
So the preponderance of emphasis, especially with early stage companies, is getting clarity on whether or not they really have, you know, whether they've really identified a problem in the market and they can articulate a solution to that problem. And if they can do that, all of the other stuff will take care of itself. People will just show up. Okay, I mean, TechTown, I've never been to Ken's place, but TechTown is a spectacular location with people there with deep Rolodexes, and all of the resources that you need will appear at your feet if it looks like you have a solution to a real problem. The problem is most entrepreneurs, to me, just sort of invert that. They focus on all the unnecessary stuff because it's easy to get your head around it, and they don't deal with the difficult thing first, which is finding product market fit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'll just quickly add to what Neil mentioned is that one thing that I think from a personal connectivity perspective of entrepreneurs, because I think we try to always remain cognizant that entrepreneurs show up as people and with baggage or experiences in history and different levels of understanding of entrepreneurship, and not ready all the time to be an entrepreneur. And so digging into a little bit of the why, that what's driving them will help, I think, us as ecosystem builders or service providers to really help differentiate between what's viable and what's not sometimes, or even furthermore, help the entrepreneur to better understand what their next step should be and what their journey is going to look like moving forward. And the other thing that I thought of as Neil was talking about is that a conversation I'll often have with entrepreneurs is it'll get to the point of asking them, are you attempting to build a product or a business? And it's different, you know, it's obviously different. And some entrepreneurs, in removing all the glitz of the finish line, which we read about, we see in headlines, we see on TV of entrepreneurs, but all of the work that is part of the iceberg that's underwater. And that's all of the difficulties, all of the pitfalls, all of the challenges, all of the days that you wake up and question, should I be doing this? But what goes into that a bit, I think, is some entrepreneurs come into it thinking that I want a business. They think they want a business, but they actually just want to build something for other purposes that maybe someone else can acquire or something that they can license. And some people don't want a team and management responsibilities and reporting financials and building a team and culture and all of those other things that go with that. So differentiating between that is often a good point with an entrepreneur.
That is perfectly well said. Sorry, you're saying something, Ken?
I was just going to add on a little bit to that. I think what has been said is really, really good. And I wanted to actually share a quick resource. So for aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are working on their idea, one of the pitfalls I see really early on is people spend a ton of time really working on their product or whatever their solution is, okay? You know, designing it to the nth degree, you know, getting it perfect. And I always try to encourage early stage entrepreneurs to apply that same, that's great that they have passion for that product or that service that they're developing, right? But to apply that same amount of passion to developing a great business model, to what Paul is saying there. And it's a big difference between developing a product and developing a company. And hopefully if you do it right, you got both. So a tool that we like to use is, I'm going to try to show this. This is called the Lean Canvas. I'm not sure if you guys can see that. And we can probably get this out there. But you can just Google this. It's the Lean Canvas. It's an adaptation of the business model canvas. This is really great for early stage ideas. And what the Lean Canvas does is it kind of forces or takes you through this path of really understanding the problem, the solution, your unique value proposition, thinking through all the facets of that. And so this is a great sort of planning tool to help you shift your thinking from developing just a product to developing a product inside of a business. And this Lean Canvas is a great tool for that.
Yeah, and these are wonderful points again, all three of you, because as a design studio, means we are a industrial design studio. We help in your product innovation, right? And we get calls from range of different, I would say manifestations of just an idea person or a little bit more startup or pre-seed or stage A also. And there are various characterizations of those. But one thing is, we typically, if we get approached by an amazing idea inventor person, is to the 2 points that both Paul and Ken you said, like, hey, we would love to design a product for you, but let's try to look at your business model. Because just having an idea and coming to a studio and designing the idea, even a design studio cannot do justice if the other parameters are not outstated, identified, or nicely positioned to make sure that product eventually is going to help you build the business. Means one of the maxims that we predominantly go through is good design is good business, and both of them are absolutely related. And the element of doing good product means when we say no product cannot be designed in isolation, not just about the ecosystem is going to be in, but no product cannot be designed in isolation of the business model itself too. So we literally means if for some of those cases, we actually encourage them to go to institutes like you, TechTown or Lean Rocket, or independent consultants. It depends on their propensity to work with a big or small or individual ones to make sure, hey, at least bring a straw man business proposal, and then we'll try to see how the product fits into the entire business case as such. And it's not just like aha idea. The hero moments are good, but somehow you have to understand what you fall in love with. So based on that, how often you get entrepreneurs or startups or inventors walk in through your doors where they absolutely are in love with the idea, and you, from your maturity of business model canvassing or other tools, have to let them know that, not this, and guide them somewhere else? How do you approach this very sensitive element in your life? This is an everyday occurrence for you, right?
I'd like to comment on that if I can, because all of these comments are just making me sort of eager to want to jump in on a number of things here. Somebody once said, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And I forgot who exactly said that. I'll tell you, pardon me?
That was Ash Myra.
Oh, there we go. Okay. But so what I realized was happening is, I have a position at the university, and for years, students would show up at my door, knock on the door and say, hey, I got this idea, what do you think? Because they were looking for validation for the idea. And I was kind of naive, and mistakenly for a year or two, I'd actually give them an opinion. Until finally I realized, number one, that that's not my role. And then number two, I kind of turned it around and I'd say, I'm not in your target market. I have no idea whether or not that idea is any good, but I can help evaluate whether your business model makes sense. Okay, you need to go validate the business idea. And so now, instead of offering an opinion, I challenge them on whether or not they actually have data, which can come in a lot of forms, from first-person interviews, from surveys, from test markets, from A/B tests, a Kickstarter. There's a million ways to sort of think about this. But the question now is, pretend I don't know anything about your market or your idea or your technology. Convince me that you have a valid idea that's going to create an opportunity that could be turned into a successful business. And then, with undergraduate students, the conversation ends there 90% of the time. But for real entrepreneurs or the corporations that you serve at your design studio, you really can then kind of take the conversation to the next level.
That's really good. I always we get the same thing all the time. People walk in the door and say, hey, I've got this idea. Is this a good idea or not? And my response is very similar. I always say the same. Look, I'm not the good idea police. And let's let the market tell you that. A little bit of my story, just to weave this in for a hot second. I'm an entrepreneur, and so I've launched and grown a handful of companies. And man, I just wish I would have known about the lean startup methodology a lot sooner. And so I did that very thing. Had this idea that I thought was brilliant, and if I think it's brilliant, other people must think that too. And so, spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to go develop that thing, and then you get it to the market and realize, well, wait a second, that didn't quite work. The market changed, or I made too many assumptions with that, and once you've developed that product fully, the ability for you to pivot and change that is a lot more difficult because you've invested so much into it. And so that's the hardest failure that's the failure I hate to see, is when startups invest all this time, energy, money developing a business or a product that didn't have enough validation early on that they could have validated, and just didn't do the work to do that. And those are the worst kind of failures, in my opinion. The good failure is that early stage, hey, I've got this idea, I'm going to go test the market. And the Lean Canvas, again, is a great tool to help you think through that. What assumptions are your riskiest assumptions to go test? And then being able to say, wait, that assumption I had about other people think this is a great idea too, or a great solution to this problem, you should be able to validate that early on. And a lot of times you're going to learn that, wait a second, that the way I was thinking about that isn't quite right. And that's a failure, but that typically, for a lot of startups, will result in a better idea that you're able to develop.
Yeah, I think Ken and both Neil made excellent points, and some things that came to mind and just listening to them is, one is, redefining failure for a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, is key. So from a psychological perspective, that they think some of those bumps and hiccups are failures, but making sure that they understand that that's just natural course of the journey. And so I think that's important when you're conversing with entrepreneurs, and also from the entrepreneurial kind of coach, mentor, service provider perspective. I think it's critical that we remain cognizant of how important that time period and that moment is when we do provide that feedback, because like the old saying goes, of it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Sometimes you hold so much in your hands at that very moment relative to the path forward of an entrepreneur if they're willing to get back up and brush themselves off, if they're willing, to continue to persevere. You can really, as a coach, sometimes I think inadvertently, and sometimes I've seen it in other ways happen, but really, crush a dream or the passion. What you don't want to do is put out that passionate fire within an entrepreneur, but you do want to help mold them. And there is, I think, an approach that we hold as a responsibility in how we deliver that message of, hey, your baby's ugly, and this is what we need to do to fix it.
and, and and that's always a very difficult and sensitive element too. Actually, the other way of looking at that is there is only one beautiful baby in the world, and every mother has it, and that's goes to the root of it. And in the similar world, how we also tell them is, and how we have aligned the innovation strategies, making sure we understand there is an hero idea, there is the baby idea. Let's park them on the idea parking map, and then try to understand what are the attributes that element is going to have, and then collecting the attributes together in the innovation pathway, which is not necessarily an idea pathway. Idea becomes locked with that artifact idea itself, whatever it is, but how to extract the attribute level back to the main element, and make sure then you can again still go and arranging things. Arrangement is the most important. Just as your dad was, Paul, in arrangement in the musical world, the arrangement of what need to do, not just for features, but for elements that people really need, want, crave, and desire and dream in the world. How to package that together, again, as Ken was saying, to make sure it will be accepted in the market. Because I think I said that in the morning, the market has no obligation to be kind to your product just because you're a startup or you have limited resources. It will be judged out there in the free market, which might be a competitor. Competitor can be a big incumbent over there too, but all depends on that differentiation, the uniqueness, compelling element part of it, but also I would say the integrity of how we are going to solve the end problems. But when we say it's human-centric design, it's not, let's say, us as designers as humans, the users as humans, they are humans too, and how you make sure you try to be respectful of that as you still try to go with your process as such. So this is beautiful. And again, please don't just have me asking questions. If you have questions that are, let's say, bothering you, troubling you, just throw them around the panel and we together kind to access that. One of the things that I think in the questions is, right now in this time, in the COVID time as such, are you changing a little bit of your business, when I say business model, let's say, or your formula or your model of how can be those tweaks done so still the startup dreams would not be annihilated? Is there something you're doing in the last 5-6 months that's going to help them more?
Yeah, I think for me, and I'll be fairly quick, one thing that comes to mind immediately is that, again, as kind of ecosystem builders, coaches, and mentors, I think for me, I'm trying to remain more cognizant of being proactive in my outreach, more than probably typical, more than when they could walk through the doors, or when, it was less chaotic in society, when it was less maybe frantic for entrepreneurs as they were going along their commercialization and startup journey. But I think those touches and just having those pulse checks with entrepreneurs, and not reactively to their needs, but also proactively, because you will identify and uncover a lot of things that they need, that what we define as sometimes blind spots that they didn't know they needed, or that they may not have been willing to come forth with, or was simply had it on the to-do list and it was going to be next week, but we really need to talk about this now.
Makes sense. Anybody else?
I'll add to that. I think the core principles haven't changed, right? We've been talking a lot about lean startup today. The methodology is the same, right? You want validation, early validation, especially on your product market fit, your value proposition. The way you get there's changed quite a bit. And in fact, I would make the argument that it's gotten better. I think that in a pre-sort of COVID world, there had to be a lot of events, in-person stuff, and the whole world has gotten used to Zoom and to virtual settings, and you can get business done a lot faster and do a lot more discovery interviews and all the things you need to do virtually, because there's no travel time, there's no none of that stuff. And so I think that the entrepreneurs that are realizing that and utilizing that, this new virtual world we're living in to their advantage are going to be further ahead. Furthermore, as I mentioned earlier, I think that in times of disruption in society and economic uncertainty is the times that the most innovation happens. This is not a correct stat, but I read somewhere recently that almost, I think it was like 50% of the Fortune 500 were started during a period of recession or the Great Depression itself. And in the lapse of time, that's less than 10% of the time where 50% of what are our biggest companies in the world were formed during that time. And so my challenge to entrepreneurs right now is, are we going to, is the reaction going to be, well, let's wait for stuff to get back to normal and, see what happens here? Or are we going to lean in and push harder, knowing that innovation is happening faster right now than before COVID, in my opinion?
That really makes two good points. I will try to come back to those 2 points. Neil, you want to have some response for that?
Well, I just agree and would emphasize what Ken just said. Unless you are like attempting to start a restaurant right now, which would probably be ill-advised, there are clearly sectors of the economy that are booming right now. And to his point, I think that it's a lot easier to get to people these days. Few people are commuting. Everybody's willing to, sort of have a Zoom call. I just got invited to do a series of seminars across Israel and Asia and Europe. And I cannot imagine that would have happened were my network not, connecting to people all over the world. I've been to some of your meetings, GVOC, and this event, probably, I don't know if you were doing webinars or not, but if this were an in-person event instead of a webinar, it would have been much more taxing on my schedule to be able to participate. And if it had occurred on a day when I was teaching in East Lansing, I would not have been able to participate, but suddenly I can. So I actually think that not everything, of course, and a lot of people are suffering, and I'm not insensitive to that, but I think in some ways, everybody's accessibility has been enhanced by what's going on right now.
Yeah, that means, again, connecting to your point and the first point that Ken made about this remote connections, virtuality, means I think just like most of you, including Paul too, I love to go and meet people, love to be physically over there, across the table, look at things, whiteboard stuff, and work with hands. Means just like Ken, we are also in the physical product making kind of an world too. But truth be told, in the first month was difficult adjusting, but now it's a 6 month. Now means I think as human species, we are so, I would say, responsive and agile and adaptive as such. I'm in a way enjoying because there's so much extra work that gets done. The other day I had to go into an in-person meeting. It takes 40 minutes to go there. And I was just thinking what else I could do in that time. So yeah, we are missing some of those active collaborations as such. I feel that element too. But on the other side, I'm gaining, just like most of the people in the world, plenty of time. And again, it depends on what people do with that time, either TikTok or doing something good also in that particular world. Not that TikTok is wrong, but how you manage your time is a pretty good element. The other part, again, that Ken, you're mentioning about the opportunity and the crisis element, it is in a way true. We have to be responsive into the reality world. Apart from what COVID did is there is still an unemployment rate is pretty high. Many people have been laid off. Some of the people are really good, intelligent people, I would say, that are beyond the daily wages as such. They have been exposed to the world of product maturity. They have exposed to the world of I would say, a mature, structured way of designing products because they come from really good companies who have been exposed to design. And now they are feeling the pressures of what to do. And no matter what, as humans, we always have at least $2 or $3 million ideas in the mind. At least we think we have those ideas. So right now is the active time where, okay, I'm seeing what's happening in the employment world. I have these ideas. I understand a mature process. It might be a design studio. It might be an institution. It might be an individual consultant. Now is the time to go ahead. So design studios, in a way, they say are the canary in the coal mine. And somehow we get to see how people are reacting and what they are reaching out for. And we can say with good pride, at least for our region, at least the Midwest region, that people, more and more people are now a little bit more curious. They're considering of putting with their ideas. An idea is not just product, but the service part of it and the GUI part of it also. So that in a way is a really good kind of an indicator of how it might eventually bubble up, and maybe the next billion-trillion dollar company is right now somewhere within the incubators, accelerators, or design studio waiting to happen. So that's beautiful. I think one of the other element that we typically face, not a problem as such, but a challenge is I think I want to just see, is this also a challenge from your side, and how you guide your candidates or members? How are you calling them? Like we open the door to, let's say, inventors walk in, and they have been, I would say, brainwashed, tempered in the right way to have an IP on that. But this is before even they think about market validation or talking to a small group of people or a studio or you, and they think that's the right way. And then they work with an IP lawyer, nothing wrong in that. And they get their IP. And then they come through the door and saying, this is my IP, let's work within that. And it's like, oh my God, that's good to have an IP protection. But now maybe that's not the exact need out in the market. How often this kind of a thing happens, where they already have invested decent amount from their self skin in the game in an element which need to be guarded because that was not, or that would not be the product in the market. So how often is this case with you, and how do you loop around elements like this? Ken?
I can jump in on that real quick. I'm actually looking at an intellectual law office right across the hall from my office. There's an IP attorney right here in our building. I say that happens, to answer your question directly, and I know we're almost out of time here, so I'll go quick. Happens all the time. People have an idea and they think that they immediately need to go get a patent to protect
Ken,
that idea.
we are not almost out of time. We still have 32 minutes. It ends at 2:30.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah,
So
don't rush. Yeah.
I'll give you the long answer then. No. But no, it happens all the time. You're really to the point of our earlier conversation, right? You get so wrapped into this this product or this solution that you're developing, and then you get to the point where, like, I need to get a patent on this or some sort of intellectual property protection. And while I would argue that is very important, it's important at the right stage. And so I'd say the same thing. Back up. Let's build a business model using Lean Canvas, and there's other tools, but Lean Canvas is a really easy to use one. And I always tell people, let's start with what your minimum success criteria is. So the question is, you, Jivak, walk into my office and you have this brilliant idea. And we sit down, and eventually I'm going to ask you, picture yourself in 2 years from today, September 10th, 2022. And you're looking back on the last 2 years. What is the minimum things that would have to happen for this to be successful for you? Okay.
I want to be a millionaire. No, I'm sorry.
Well, sometimes that's the answer. And sometimes they're like, well, you know, it's different, right? But that helps you understand. That's a good question to ask yourself if you're an entrepreneur. Helps you understand where you're going with that. And then I say, okay, if that's your minimum success criteria, let's go backwards and let's build into a business model. And I always tell people, if it doesn't work on paper, it's not going to work in real life. But just because it works on paper doesn't mean it will work in real life. And I am actually continually surprised at how many times we can't make it work on paper, which is really good. Back to our earlier conversation of that's like the best kind of failure, because now we can do something about that. Okay, well, that model doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? What assumptions have you made that broke apart? And let's go deal with that. And sometimes it results in them saying, you know what, you're right. I need to go back to the drawing board. This isn't something I want to spend the money to go patent. Or a lot of times it does result in a better idea that is a better market fit. So.
That's beautiful. I would, sorry, Neil and Paul, I will just make a comment on this. What you're saying is pretty amazing. And so we have been here for the last 87 years. We work with lots of startups. And in the earlier questions, Ken, we really asked them, okay, what are your aspirations? Why are you doing this? We had to go to the root of elements, and we get some really good answers. Sometimes they are literally solving the need and all those elements that might be a problem they have seen or surfaced. But literally in the first questions we ask, nobody ever says anything about money to be generated. I do not know why people are not upfront in that. Like, yeah, one of the thing is I want to make so much of money too. But the thing is, as we go along with the project, in middle, someone say like, oh, we cannot do this. Why cannot we do this? Because no, then the profit margins and all those things. It happens with big companies too. So sometimes I think we all as a team to help startups and entrepreneurs and everybody with an idea to understand, okay, what are the real needs? What do you see in the stakeholders of value? And value, it can also be equated to making money and then using it for right purposes too. But that's a simple question. But the answer doesn't reveal unless you probe for it. Like, okay, we talked about altruism, we talked about better conditions, better world, zero pollution, zero poverty. Now let's talk about why you're doing this, how much you want to make. And then I did not think about that. So sometimes making sure at the end how the decisions are going to be made cast a shadow on the toolings or the process of manufacturing, all those things. So that's a pretty important point too. Sorry, Paul or Neil.
Well, I would echo what you're saying, but Paul triggered this for me a couple of minutes ago when he talked about the dialogue that he has when he meets entrepreneurs. And what I've learned, through the School of Hard Knocks is the first question that I always ask people when I meet them is, or the advice that I give them is know thyself. And I forget which one of the Greek philosophers coined that term. But understanding somebody's motivation is really important. I know that it clearly is true, when you're serving corporate clients, but with entrepreneurs, whether their desire is to make money, launch a lifestyle business, solve a problem, address a social inequity that they perceive, help people, restore justice, everybody's got some sort of motivation. And you're right, it's rarely making money. Although that could be it too. With a lot of the professors that I work with, sometimes it's just wanting to see their scientific innovations come to market and become ubiquitous. Money is a secondary phenomenon. But whatever it is, I've learned that you have to get that on the table first. And because the kind of people that you'll hire, the kind of investors that you'll look to recruit, the flavor of money that you'll take, all are dependent upon your motivation and what you're trying to get out of your enterprise and what your exit looks like. So I've learned that you got to really get clarity around that point very quickly, very early on.
Yeah, and the question I think you might have just left for that minute. The question was about the IP also. Like sometimes people come inside the door with already IP around something which might not be the real need in the market. How often does that happen, and what might be the, I would say, the elements that you do to counteract that?
Well, I'm sure everybody could address this topic, but ideas don't have value. Execution is what creates value. I just gave a lecture about this yesterday using some slides from Guy Kawasaki. And you have to explain this to people, right? But everybody's always fearful. And this is what I think you were talking about, that if they divulge their idea, somebody's going to steal it, and that's going to devalue, the idea for their own ability to pursue that. And that is rarely, if ever, true. And so changing the focus to understanding how value is created and the importance of execution and the other ways that you can erect moats to protect your idea, whether it's around distribution channels, manufacturing know-how, access to customers. Yes, of course, intellectual property matters to a degree, but rarely in my experience does it matter to the degree that most unsophisticated entrepreneurs believe that it does.
Yeah, I think, like, to Neil's point, I think he hit it on the head that, execution is the differentiator. And it was spoken earlier, that the market is really the ultimate arbitrator. So I like to use those two kind of themes. But from an IP, I'm always quick to say, I'm not a lawyer, but, I do, and I may have some guidance or some suggestions or some advice. But again, leveraging our entrepreneur ecosystem. And I think the first assumption of an entrepreneur is that I'm not going to be able to afford a legal advice. I'm not going to be able to afford $250 or $500 or $750 an hour or whatever that rate is. And we've got a myriad of awesome and amazing resources in our entrepreneur ecosystem that lawyers are giving pro bono or low bono time to give, you know, great legal advice and consultation and guidance. And I'll make one point of maybe a kind of a mini commercial for one of our entrepreneurial service organizations that I've worked with from a legal perspective on IP, and that's SBDC, which is a subsidiary or branch here of SBA, Small Business Development Center, provides a free consultation of a deep dive and an IP analysis with a tool that uses data analytics that looks at, you know, threats and patent searches and litigations and M&A activity in this space, and really gives you a full-blown depth analysis. And they do this at no cost for entrepreneurs. And they use a tool, I think the tool is called Anography, but it is something that is offered in our ecosystem. So I, again, try to know my lane well and defer to and lean on those who are experts in other lanes so that we can best collectively help the entrepreneur succeed.
That's beautiful. What's the name of the tool you said, Paul?
Anography. So the group is SBDC, Small Business Development Center of Michigan. And they have coaches, mentors, events, educational tools, webinars, seminars that happen throughout the state from top to bottom all year round, and coaches and mentors who are dispersed throughout our state that are working with entrepreneurs of all types, not just tech, but small business entrepreneurs, later stage entrepreneurs, you know, you name it. And this is one tool that they have brought to the ecosystem as a means of accessibility for IP analysis, evaluation, comparison, to make better decisions around what you truly have, and a cost-benefit analysis of if IP protection is not always even financially worth it, or from a time perspective, always worth it. Sometimes entrepreneurs obviously will go too far down the legal protection to the point of what Neil talked about a lot, feeling that I need to have a patent because the patent is the holy grail. And now I've spent 4 months doing that, and the market has, like a jackrabbit, run by me.
That's absolutely true. Sometimes lots of time burden and I would say the vulnerability get exposed during that kind of an going the extra mile for the protection also. But talking about, again, not just the money to be made from the entrepreneur, let's talk about money. That is, I understand what Neil mentioned earlier, money should not be the first thing as such, but let's talk about when we come to the stage where money is needed. Typically, how typically you offer different elements in that, because as a design studio, we sometimes we have to ask them to see, okay, we can do the design that you want, we can do the design for the people you want in the end market, but tell us about your money sources, because very often we have seen that we do not want to take money because they're going to put their house on a mortgage, or it's going to cause a relationship struggle between the spouses. We have seen that, and we don't want to do that. So typically that's where we want them to be handed off to somebody. I know there is I would say kind of a cadence of pre-seed, seed, but can you tell a little bit more about what might be the money sources for the members coming in your doors, and what is typically your advice for them to put or not put their skin in the game?
Yeah, I'll speak to plethora of resources that I think our ecosystem offers. And obviously, I think this was mentioned earlier, that it's very maturity or stage dependent, obviously, of what you're ready for and what you should take on. And I think that there's always needs to be the question that, do you really need, institutional capital? I think that a lot of entrepreneurs see that as they've crossed a finish line of some sorts when they raise capital or external capital. I think they often put too much into that as validation of success for their business model or for their idea. Whereas I like to remind them, now the real work actually starts when you actually raise external or institutional capital, because now you have true real world accountability. Now you have milestones that you're going to be held to. Now you have other people who are going to be managing, macro or micro managing, some of the business affairs of your business. And so that's when it kind of gets real. And so I like to change the philosophy and sometimes the approach of how entrepreneurs are thinking. But everything from, I think there's obviously a growing and robust angel network that has really, I've seen in the last 2 years, really start to mature and grow. And I think that, there's gentlemen, and I'm sure that everybody on this line knows, or a lot of the people who are in the entrepreneur ecosystem, Skip Sims and the MEDC have really been working hard to start and create more angel capital, because it's no secret, I think, as well, that Michigan is a very well-resourced financially, state. Some of the richest counties and richest, cities across the country are right here in Michigan. But there is a process of a two-sided, both sides of the equation, of educating not only the entrepreneurs about what it means to take on institutional or angel capital, but also educating some people who have just not participated in that level of, investment processes or angel investing. And so there's a two-sided kind of level of education that I see really flourishing in our state, and more angels, individuals and or angel groups really emerging, not just in Detroit, not just in Southeastern Michigan, but across our state even. And of course, there's the VC market. I always point to MBCA, which has an amazing tool on their website as well, to where entrepreneurs can proactively, and I think that this is critically important, that entrepreneurs approach raising capital from a position of strength and not put from a position of, I have my hand out for everything. And so that every investor is not right, every investor is not a fit, and you need to go to the table when prepared well, leveraging the ecosystem from a position of negotiating strength and understanding that you have as much or more to offer to that investor as they do to you. And so making sure that there's that product market fit or investor market fit for investment capital is critical. And then there's the pitch competitions. Obviously, there's accelerators that provide capital. So I'm going to let the other guys also chime in, because there's just so much that I think, and it just goes to the effect and reflection that our ecosystem is, in fact, very rich and very strong as it respects or as it relates to entrepreneurial growth.
Yeah, both of the points are really amazing on the head about asking for money is one, but then making sure you know what you are anticipating also about getting managed, micro or macro, because it's completely different. Ask what you ask, think about what you ask for, right? And the second part is also, as you mentioned, is the adequate training, or at least mentoring the angels as such, to let them know how this ecosystem works and the risk also involved in that, and how they can hedge their investments into a couple of different kind of stages. So both of them extremely amazing points. Who wants to go next?
I'll chime in on that. First of all, everything Paul just said, listen to that. That was really well said, Paul. A couple of things I want to add. One, if you're an entrepreneur and you're seeking investment, I would encourage you to actually back up a little bit, and part of being an entrepreneur is being really resourceful. And my encouragement to entrepreneurs most of the time is, can you get your product to market? Can you get a real customer with real money to buy your real product before taking your first investment dollar? That's always my goal with entrepreneurs. It's not always feasible, because some things take a lot of R&D money. But if you can get to that point, the secret to raising capital, if you're an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs don't care about your idea. They don't care about you. And I know we all think that investors invest in good ideas. Investors invest in traction. And if you can demonstrate your traction and the rate at which that traction is increasing, the easier it's going to be for you to get investment. And if you try to raise capital without traction or before traction, or if your traction is not accelerating, you're going to be giving away a lot more equity than you want to. And then if you get stuck in that trap of getting investor dollars, well, investors, they want to make money, right? That's the whole point of being an investor. And so which means they're going to push you, and then they're going to push you to an exit because they want to get their money out of your company. And so you have to think about all those things. And the further you can get, the more traction you can get, the better positioned you are for talking to investors.
Ken, can you explain for the audience, what do you mean by traction?
So traction is, simply put, the amount of sales. There's different measurements for different companies, but just the most basic form is selling your real product to real customers with real money. And it's the market saying, yes, I want that, and I'm willing to give up my resources to get that solution to my problem. And the more you can demonstrate that the market's doing that, and if it's accelerating, then you're in the perfect sweet spot. And as I mentioned earlier, I know that's frustrating to hear for some entrepreneurs because they're like, well, I just need money to like develop this thing and get to this place. And that's the beautiful thing about this ecosystem that has been built in Michigan. Walk into your local smart zone. And for me, as an entrepreneur, I wish I would have known about all this stuff when I was trying to develop my companies. It would have saved me a lot of money and a lot of time. I'm going to actually drop a link in our chat here. This is a quick sort of PDF of sort of a preview of some of the programs that are available through the MEDC and through the Smart Zone Network, exclusively through the Smart Zone Network. These include things like the Business Accelerator Fund. Business Accelerator Fund is one of the main tools that we use. You can get up to $50,000 of non-dilutive grant money through the MEDC, and up to $50,000. It depends on what kind of business you are, how high tech it is, etc. There's first capital money, and I'm sure Neil will talk about Michigan Rise. And that link I just sent you will kind of walk you through all the different Michigan early stage resources. But if you can figure out how to use some of that stuff, leverage your local smart zone, and get to that point where you're getting some traction, that's when it's time to talk to an investor.
Awesome. Thank you for the links, and there are plenty of other links also in the chat box. So make sure you copy paste them before it goes away. Neil.
Yeah, as before, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said, and I don't want to be duplicative in any way. But I have a standard slide in all of my presentations that says investors don't invest in businesses, they invest in people. And so a big part of my coaching with entrepreneurs is to explain to them, as we've talked about before, that it's not the idea that is going to get them the money. It's their talent and their conviction and their commitment and their passion to a good business idea. So that's first and foremost. But to build on what Ken just said, it's also been my experience, and I've been one of these people too. When I was an inexperienced entrepreneur, I managed to get some money and then promptly wasted it because I didn't know what I was doing. And so the other part of the coaching process is to make sure that entrepreneurs have a cogent plan that has been vetted and critiqued by a lot of people. Because, as an entrepreneur, you kind of live your whole life waiting for somebody to give you money, and then finally somebody does, and you have no conception that that's when your problems really begin, not end. Okay, Paul alluded to this before, that, oh shit, I just took money from somebody and now I'm obliged to deliver. Okay, that kind of pressure is unimaginably different than the why won't anybody give me money, the world sucks and all these people are idiots kind of attitude that you have prior to that. So raising money is critical, but what I've learned also the hard way is to have a really good plan that's milestone driven so that you're really clear that by the time you spend the money that you've asked for, you have moved your business to a place to where it's either going to become profitable or, to Ken's point, is going to have enough traction to allow you to raise the next round of money. Because I've also been involved in companies that get that first round and then face plant into the wall, unable to raise the second round because they didn't have sufficient progress. And that's a really tough place to be too. So in my middle age, and with wisdom and experience, I've learned to be really, to place much more of an emphasis on planning than I used to. I used to just throw a lot of shit at the wall and see what sticks, and somebody gave us money and we're going to try a lot of stuff and hopefully a business will emerge out of this, but that's that's not really the way you use other people's money. You can use your own money to do that. With other people's money, you have to be able to deliver something that's tangible, and that's where I try to draw everybody's attention.
That makes sense. I know we have only so much time, but just as incubators or accelerators, how do you keep on learning? Means do you align with somebody from Berlin or somebody from Nigeria or somebody somewhere else where they are grappling with the similar challenges or the demographics as such? How do you as institutions keep yourself innovating?
This will probably serve as a possible additional commercial of some sorts, but I was lucky when I entered TechTown. One of the entrepreneurial organizations that I joined initially as a member, and now I serve as a board member, is NBIA, the International Business Incubator Association, or Innovation Association now. And it is effectively a network of hundreds of incubators and accelerators around the world, where incubator managers, incubator ecosystem builders, people who run entrepreneurial centers can connect. And I think that whether it's Michigan or you're in another city or state or country, it is very easy for us, because of the passion that we're driven by, obviously, is to become engulfed in serving the needs of our clients, which of course we're here for, we're paid to do this. But at the same time, I think we also have to continuously read books like Neil produces, or connect with other entrepreneurial service managers and ecosystem builders to not only understand and learn from them, but also the rewards, as in life, of what you will understand, that what you can give to someone else who is earlier than you or is working to figure out a challenge that you've been through. I think we can easily underestimate our own experiences, whether that's you've been in this sector for 6 months or 16 years, you still have a lot to give. And I think that bi-directional kind of gift that NBIA has provided me, I strongly recommend people who are serving entrepreneurs to look at and look into, because it is immensely valuable to be able to connect with your peers and learn from one another, as you alluded to.
That makes sense. Thank you. Maybe I think we are almost, maybe still have 7 minutes. So at least maybe if a few minutes per head, let's try to go with our, let's say, closing, as I would call, nuggets of wisdom for you to offer some of these wannabe startups and entrepreneurs as such. So anything that on the hindsight, this is what you should be doing, that we talked a lot about, or this is what you should not be doing, guys. Anything kind of an collective aggregates that you want to share in the closing remarks?
As you posed the question, I was trying to reflect on what I think is most important, because we've talked about a lot of things. But for me, at the end of the day, and not surprisingly, and this isn't a plug for my book, but it is the nature of what we wrote about, finding product market fit, really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve for your customers, understanding their buying criteria, understanding how they're going to know about your product, what alternatives they're going to look at, how they're going to get it, how they're going to pay for it. That piece is just so essential, and most people who walk in the door with just kind of an idea or a gee, maybe I oughta kind of attitude, don't have answers to those questions. And we could talk endlessly about the reasons why startups fail, but the number one reason is because they build a product that nobody wants to buy. And so eliminating that risk, which you can do to a great degree, maybe even 100% before you start spending a lot of money, is the number one issue as far as I'm concerned. Everything else, you can, people, like I said before, people will show up to help you, and there's tons of resources represented by the people on this panel, but the value is created really in the identification of a problem and a solution to a problem.
Completely makes sense. Thank you, Neil.
Yeah, so I'll just mention a few quick things that came to mind. Is one, I think we as ecosystem builders, should always be conscious of and trying to do a better job at this, but entrepreneurs themselves as well should be looking to connect with other entrepreneurs that are earlier than them, and obviously those who are later than them, quote unquote, or more mature or have been through what they anticipate they're gonna go through or where they wanna be. And I think that peer circle and establishing that, and it's almost like parenting in some ways, you know, you can say the same thing to your child, but someone else says it to it and it's received much differently. I think I find that amongst entrepreneurs, that when entrepreneurs connect with other entrepreneurs, no matter how many times they've heard it from a coach, sometimes it just resonates differently in a different way. So I would say connect with other entrepreneurs and learn about their wins, their losses, their challenges, their ups and their downs, and build relationships, not just you know, tactical, but really strategical, longer term, intentional relationships with other entrepreneurs. I would say make sure that you document and make sure that you are collecting data at every point, as early as you can start, that you are documenting your journey, your pathway, your learnings, your findings, your mistakes, what you're hearing from the market, and always listen to the market. And you have to be willing to look in the mirror and be honest enough and okay with saying that, you know, I didn't hear what I wanted to hear, but I've got to let the pride go sometimes and go down a different path. And last I would say is, you know, don't run out of time. Don't be in this analysis to paralysis kind of thing that Ken spoke about it earlier. When you talked about traction, I always mention to entrepreneurs that they need to reach traction with velocity, you know, like with speed and also with positive direction combined is how you get velocity and how you get, you know, measurable traction. So those are just some small tips that immediately kind of came to mind.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Paul. Ken?
Gosh, I think Neil and Paul just gave some great nuggets of wisdom there. I call those wisdom bombs. So I don't have a ton to add. But I will say, now's the time. And what I mean by that is there has never been more resources available to help you start a company. And so walk into TechTown, walk into Lean Rocket, walk into any of the Smart Zone network incubators, and just discover what's available. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur, this is your permission. Go do it. Walk in and get some support in doing that. And I would also say that this is the place. Michigan has a long and proud history of innovation. Some of the world's coolest innovations and world's most successful innovations have happened right here in Michigan. And undoubtedly, we're at the edge of a new society, a disruption in our society with mobility, with the way work is getting done. There is so much change happening in our world right now. And I believe that Michigan can lead that innovation curve for our country and for the world. And so if you're an innovator, you have an idea, you're an entrepreneur, I encourage you to stand up and walk into your local Smart Zone incubator. If you don't want to walk in, every one of us has abilities to meet with you virtually and digitally, call, email, Facebook, text, whatever you got to do. But just get plugged in and start getting connected and just go.
Awesome. Well, we are perfectly right on time there, gentlemen. Thank you again, Ken, Neil, and Paul. For it was really interesting, and I think for the audience it would be not just one or two, but lots of wisdom bombs over there. So thank you again for what you do. Thank you again for what you do for the economy of all the states. Michigan, we are proud of where we are, but we need the grassroots level entrepreneurship to rise again. And I think this is the time. Literally, now is the time. This is the place to be, and we can just keep on innovating and helping each other and pushing the entire economy up. So again, feel free to continue be on the call. Just mute and unvideo yourself, and we can we will start with our next session actually. And feel free to be audience for that to see and add any feedback as we are going through that.